this episode, we've been invited to look into ACS Abu Dhabi, where they've rolled out a teacher leadership program designed to give teachers and middle leaders autonomy between different topics to work on and learn through. One of the best parts about the program, though, is the time efficiency and ease of providing feedback between the teachers themselves and the expert consultant leading the program. I'm joined on this episode by Kristine Mazzoni and Aaron Shelby. Kristine is an author and educational consultant who supports schools in the areas of social and emotional learning and organizational leadership. Aaron is the secondary curriculum coordinator at ACS. Aaron was part of the team that created the program we're showcasing today. So, without further ado, let's go inside the ACS Huddle. Welcome back to Inside the Huddle. We're here for episode 2, joined by ACS Abu Dhabi and Kristine. I'm going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. Kristine, if we can start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Vic. Hi, I'm Kristine Mazzoni, and I am a social emotional learning consultant. I also work with the International School Counselor Association as their professional learning coordinator.
Awesome. Thanks for being here with us this morning, Kristine. And then Aaron.
Yes, I'm Aaron Shelby, and I'm the secondary curriculum coordinator here at the American Community School in Abu Dhabi.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here. I know time is precious, especially at this time of the school year. So we appreciate you joining us and sharing a little bit of what's happening there at ACS.
Great to be.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So we're going to jump right in with both feet. One of the things that we do here at Inside the Huddle is talk to teams that are doing innovative things, progressive things, whether it's in education or in business or whatever sector you happen to be in. And we're hearing some great things that are happening at ACS, some innovative things, some things that maybe are unique to ACS, and we want to know what's going on. And so, Aaron, I'm going to start with you. From what I understand, and please, both of you, correct me if I'm wrong, you're currently on this journey with some middle leadership. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so it is middle leadership. Right now, it's the first year of this journey. And so it's about giving them a chance to have a little bit of autonomy in their professional development and maybe pick and choose a couple different options that exist in the program that you've built, which is great. Having been a middle leader in the past, I think all of us here have been educators for a really long time. I know I have over 20 years in education. I believe both of you as well have over 20 years in education. So, it's not one of those things where we often got a chance to pick and choose our professional development that happened in-house. So my first question for you, Aaron, and in the community there at ACS is, what was happening there on the ground that kind of got the dialogue going to get you guys to what would be day one of this journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel very timely, this conversation, because at this point in the year here, looking at May, for us to reflect on all of the good work that has happened and happening. And so thank you for that question, just to kind of get us started. Where do we start in this journey? So Bobby Donison, our Director of Teaching and Learning here at ACS, she and I were thinking about how best to support our teacher leaders here. And when we say teacher leaders here at ACS, we're talking about our learning leaders, which function as department heads. We're talking about our grade level leaders. We're talking about our SEL leaders. And so we have a variety of different positions in that middle leadership structure. And how best do we meet their needs with this big looming cloud of time? And so really that being a major factor in terms of thinking about how best to support them, but knowing time is of the essence. We can't invent time, we can't create it. So how can we re-envision the support that we provide our teacher leaders in their growth, but also just giving them what they need in that moment for their teams or their departments in a different way than what's been happening in previous years. And so that really got us thinking about what could a more embedded and asynchronous learning opportunity look like. And Kristine is a friend of ACS, and we had been working with her for years now. And then thinking about where we're at in the fall, we just kind of started brainstorming with her. And so this really was an exciting opportunity for us to continue our work with Kristine and looking and really thinking about what is a different approach to supporting these leaders in our school.
Great. So you mentioned you've worked with Kristine before. So Kristine, can you kind of give me, a little bit more of that lead up to day one and how you were involved in this.
Yeah. So I was first contacted by ACS now maybe 3 years ago, and they were really interested in doing some work around specifically their advisory program for middle and high. And when I started with them, we started with advisory, but we knew it wasn't going to end there. That advisory is a nice little neat place to pack social emotional learning in terms of explicit instruction and practice and becoming a small community within a larger school. And that's always the starting place. It's not enough. So we were really always looking at how do we scale out and up and all around ACS for social emotional learning. And for me, it's impossible to separate leadership from social emotional learning. It's really at the intersection of SEL and leadership where real change happens, where we're really modeling what we mean by social and emotional learning in our schools. And every meeting that we have, every professional learning experience, it's always an opportunity to build adult social emotional competencies so that we can lead well and teach well those skills for our students. So when Aaron and Bobby said, this is what we're thinking for middle leadership, and I've done a lot of work with schools where I would come in and maybe do their start of the year middle level leadership, kind of retreat or a mid-year check-in, sort of expanding upon their skills with adaptive schools, building on that. This was a little bit different. We started with purpose. When we designed this professional learning experience for middle leaders, we wanted it to be deeply personal. We wanted it to not just be about acquiring skills or that one-off touch point, one-off conference that we send people out to or consultant that we bring in, but really about becoming the leader that they aspire to be. So we focused on really identity-driven growth by using that word becoming. Who is it that you want to become? And becoming, we were purposeful in the way we named this because, we see this as continuous evolution, that becoming acknowledges that leadership isn't a fixed destination. It's a continuous, process of growth and redefinition. So there's a lot of different ways that we strategically went about this, but we were looking for a place to do this. This asynchronous work, should we do this on Google? Should I upload a bunch of asynchronous lessons on a Google site and people can work their way through there? But then we said, well, we need them to be able to interact with one another. And I need to be able to get in and see what they're doing and how they're learning along this pathway.
Yeah, it's all important, right? So we've got time. Aaron mentioned we can't build any more of it. Kristine, you talked on the point that many times consultants come in or we send out, as schools, we send teachers out to these 1 day or even 3 day workshops or retreats. But then where's the follow-up, right? That's usually the big question is how do we keep the momentum going? You mentioned identity-driven growth. So how does the growing happen? So clearly that was something that was talked about at ACS. And I know, again, knowing a little bit of the background, this is a year-long process. So there's clearly multiple stages involved throughout the year. Can you kind of give me a picture of what that looks like? Again, I have a bit of an idea. Our listeners probably don't. So let's move to day one now. Let's talk about the rollout. How do we tell our middle leaders this is what we're doing, and how was that picture painted for them?
Yeah, I'll start us off, and then I think Aaron can, because it was definitely a partnership between like consultant and school here. What I really wanted was for it to be invitation and not expectation. And Aaron wanted that too, but maybe you could talk more about how they were invited into the process.
So this, again, just thinking about what do our leaders need at this point in time when we launched it. And so it was very much an invitation to join this work and this thinking and ultimately the growth that each of them, I think, has shown. And we'll talk a little bit more just in terms of the process where they'll end up. But really, it was just invitational. So in that sense, thinking programmatically, optional for teachers to participate. And out of our about 35 teacher leaders, we have about 20 that opted in. And so I think we had a good start. And again, individually, as I've been able to connect with our teacher leaders just in my regular meetings with them, they've had nothing but positive things to say about the experience and the, I would say, bespoke nature to it, really meeting their needs in that moment with whatever they might be dealing with in terms of their teams, and thinking about, as Kristine mentioned, those relationships that we have within a team or individually with team members. So thinking how best to plan for, prepare for that, and support the growth of our team. And so that has been a lot of work, I would say, that our teacher leaders have focused on, knowing as well we wanted to capitalize on the foundation of adaptive schools. And as Kristine said, this invitation there for them to really then dig into it. And so when we launched it, we also thought about what is this freedom within form that we can give them. And so they had three pathways that they could opt into, one being a change agent, the next one being a skilled facilitator, the last one being a team builder. And all three tracks followed a similar structure in terms of learning and then application. And then we're rounding the corner here of finishing up and debriefing. So I'll turn it back over to Kristine to talk a little bit more about those three different areas of the learning process.
Great. And Aaron, wouldn't you say that the choice matters? Like that they have choice
Sure.
matters here.
Yeah.
So we provided those three different pathways. It was allowing participants to choose an identity that resonated with their personal passions, even, and their own professional context. Like people come in and out of our schools all the time and they have different experiences. So we don't want to assume everybody's at this kind of foundational level and everybody needs this. There's no one size fits all here. And it deepens commitment, I find too. So, when leaders choose a part of their identity to focus on, they naturally, I think, become more committed to developing the practices and the mindsets that support that identity. It's a little less like not so much what do you want to learn, but who do you want to become? And I think I think that matters absolutely with professional learning. And so then I would say, yeah, with this like identity intensive middle leadership, we're really thinking about how middle leaders are in the trickiest place, right? They're navigating complex layers of influence, upward, downward, sideways. Effectiveness depends not just on their tactics, but really on, who they're seen to be. And there's that social and emotional aspect of that. So when you think about becoming a change agent, I frame that more as becoming a change artist. Like people, how do you design for change, given that change is deeply emotional for people? And so when we know what do our team members need in that middle level leadership role, we're not necessarily the ones that are deciding on a new initiative. We're the ones that are supporting it and we're accelerating it oftentimes. And so we have to understand really what it means for people, humans, to go through a change journey and how we can support that socially and emotionally. So that's really, each of these pathways had that common thread of SEL. And so no matter which one you chose, you were always thinking and reflecting on that part for that kind of internal coherence across the pathways. So they were distinct, but there was some coherence across all three. So, and as Aaron said, there were those three distinct stages. So like the ready was getting them ready, giving them the mini lessons. And that was all. You have this much time, a big chunk of time, weeks and weeks and weeks, to go through these mini lessons or these modules that I had created on Huddle Up. And then they were able to run with it. So they went and they tried an application task. And we also added in these optional one-on-one kind of coaching sessions where I would hop on a Zoom call with someone and say, like, how's it going? What burning questions do you have now that you've gone through some of those learning modules? Or specifically, what are you looking to do as you apply your learning? How can I help you navigate that or give you some ideas? So they had that one-on-one opportunity as well. And also in that stage, we designed for and planned for some cohort style learning. So if you were in the change agent pathway, we all came together on Zoom and we kind of were able to work together that way. So it was sort of a hybrid, it was asynchronous, but then these optional touch points for people to jump on. And then in just a few weeks, when we get into the huddle phase, which is really about collaborating and having this continuous loop of feedback, that is when I'm going to be on site actually. And I'm really excited to bring all three pathways together for an in-person experience. But yeah, it's that action and reflection loop that I'm finding really powerful. Participants are experimenting. They're trying new behaviors. They're trying new protocols. And when we try, we often fail forward and we need a support group to help us with that. So we're reflecting on what they're learning and they're iterating and reinforcing that kind of sense of who they're becoming on their leadership journey.
No, that's great to hear, because to hear the word that, that they're trying, and you're saying it with some conviction and some passion, that could only mean that they feel safe, right? Because they feel safe where they know they're going to get the support, they're going to get some feedback, and like you said, they're going to fall forward. So clearly, the team there has created this environment, this feeling, this culture of safety. And so I'm going to tip a hat to you right now for that, because that's not always the case, right? A lot of times, like you said, it's go try, here's some modules, see what you can get from it, and we move on. So there's a couple different points that were brought up there that I want to kind of cycle back to. I keep hearing the word optional, which is lovely. Aaron, you mentioned about 20 out of the 35, you said, roughly. And I'm assuming all 20 are still active on their journey.
Yes.
Okay, what about the other 15? Are they like, man, could we jump in later? Was that a thing?
So once everybody started running, were no multiple races happening, at least for the pilot. And so I think that's some of the thinking we need to do to see in the next iteration, what could this look like in terms of, again, people's own schedules, really, and what they have going on, other responsibilities. So if I'm not ready to start in September, is it something that I could start in November? What does that mean? That it's not happening all at once. But for this current iteration, once we kind of close the window towards the beginning of February, and once that a date happened, then that cohort was gearing up to.
Okay. No, that's good. I'm an energy guy, if you can't tell. So like, I'm always kind of feeling, there's my energy that I give out, and then also the energy in the building as well. And so my curiosity lies with the energy in the building of those 20. How are they feeling going through this process now? So
We're curious about that too. We built that into the process, I would say too, because even just in my one-on-ones with people, I felt like that was where I could really connect with people personally about the experience. And I found that many of them were willing to share like, oh, this is why I signed up, or this what some of my hesitancy was around signing up. And I think we removed some of the barriers by design ahead of time, so that it was really kind of low stakes. It was posed as a pilot, that they knew they were going to be part of something special. Like, no one's really heard of this exactly
great.
in terms of professional learning format. And I think it felt special for people as they were sharing with me, like, to be part of that and to see how it goes. And so it attracted people that wanted to be there. And it was a large group. My hunch is that to offer this again to the wider community, or to the whole group again. And I would be very, very curious to see. My hunch is that more people would want to opt in.
So yeah,
I think this.
hearing you talk. Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead.
I was just going to say this goes to the power of coaching. So thinking about, again, how this has been designed, and knowing that we do have a coaching program here at ACS, instructional coaching, and this kind of tipping into leadership coaching. So I'm not necessarily thinking about my students and what's happening in the classroom, but a very similar structure of, I have something I want to learn, I want to implement it, but I know there's a safe space for me to talk about and think through those things that pop up as I'm implementing, to go back to the drawing board, try again, and I have that thought partner alongside me. And I was just going to also add that many of the teacher leaders that I've been able to connect with have spoken very highly of those one-on-one sessions with Kristine, based on getting to that point, knowing what they've learned and started to develop out of that learning, to have that thought partner who is a little separate from the school. So they know they have the job embedded here, that I meet with them on a regular basis, but to get that outside perspective and just another voice in their thought process, they spoke very highly of.
Yeah, I think
No, that's great. Well, I was going to say real quick, you've mentioned adaptive schools a couple of times. It sounds like Kristine becomes a third point, right? This other perspective that they feel safe with, that'll give them feedback that they're seeking without feeling judged or evaluated at the school, in the school campus, in the school environment.
Yeah. And I think something that really makes this work well, and always has, whether it was with when we were working at an advisory or when I'm there in person, what always works well, what makes this sort of like a model consultancy for me, from my perspective, is the partnership that I have with Aaron and Bobby and their team. because it's not like they just purchased this program and then I step away. They're on the ground meeting with people as well and doing some real strategic work that happens in the space in between. So it honestly is this, it feels like sometimes the frustration can be when you're a consultant, like you come in, you do your thing, and then you leave, and you're not entirely sure of the impact or the staying power. But I always have that touch point with Aaron and Bobby, where like I know, and we're constantly going back and forth. And this huddle up experience, even more so, because we're seeing artifacts of the professional learning. So even just last night, I logged into Huddle Up and I looked and I saw somebody had uploaded their run, and their run was to create an action plan because they were in the change agent pathway. And I was blown away by this action plan. You could just see evidence of, I was like, oh, that came from the first mini lesson. And here she is applying this change theory model that she read in the resource bank. You can just see it. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this is really powerful, because now I'll be able to give her feedback right there, right now on the platform. But then also her colleagues are getting to see that, and it'll inspire some of them and what their action plans are looking like as well. So it's just been so different, so powerful, and really a dream as a consultant.
No, there's power in that, right? I know we've all been students. We've all been on the rise, in our profession. And there's just those moments where you have a task in front of you and you're like, man, I'm not really sure how to get started. And so you take a peek at the person over here and you're like, that's how you're doing that. And then boom, that was your spark. And now you can run with yours and your idea. And so, yeah, having a little bit of experience with the Huddle Up platform myself, I can see where that comes into play. Kristine, you talk about getting one-on-one sessions. I don't ever remember having access to any consultant that came into any school I was at after the days they were there on campus. They all leave an email or whatever, hey, write me a message, let me know. But it sounds like you built in this opportunity for these teacher leaders to truly reach out, work with you, and get your feedback. How's that different from things you've done in the past?
Yeah, it's so special. And again, I think that what's really been helpful for me is this is a long-term relationship with ACS. So I've had some of the people that have been part of the Huddle Up come onto the one-on-ones, and it's like, oh my gosh, how are you? How's your baby? Like we're reconnecting because we know each other. And
Right.
part of that I think is why they're signing up as well, is they already have, some of them have a relationship with me. And so some of that trust and the credibility, the rapport has been built. And I wonder about that a bit, like how that impacts people's interest in being part of this, but then also what they're willing to be vulnerable, I think, with me. And I'm vulnerable with them. I think it's a really special, special experience that I'm having as well. I'm getting so much out of it myself. So it's just felt, again, different from other experiences. And I want to think about how more schools might see this as a model.
Great. So going back a little bit to the process and the readies and the runs, you mentioned that the readies were pre-modules that you had already built out with specific deadlines, I think is what everybody needs to be done with their modules by this time. And that was all based on the track that they chose to focus on. Now we get to the runs. What were some of the possibilities of runs that the different tracks could do? Kind of paint the picture for our listeners of what options people had on like phase 2 of this process.
Yeah. So if you were in the change agent pathway, it was to now take a change initiative, either something really that's really happening at your school, or something a change that you would like to see. So we even have somebody who has something they're going to be rolling out to the ACS leadership team as an idea that they have. I mean, how cool is that? But they've thought through. Can you imagine how much more compelling their proposal will be now that they're going to attach it to actual change theory, and they have an action plan to present to their leadership team? I know as a school leader, I would have been so happy to have that meeting with somebody. So there's so much agency, I think, that happens with this. And I think it's going to make a big impact school wide. So people are practicing making an action plan, but then they're also hoping to really roll it out and really use it. That's change agent. Then if you're in the skilled facilitator one, you are designing an agenda for an upcoming meeting and applying everything that you learned in that pathway to create the most effective meeting and most productive meeting, and meeting the social and emotional needs of your colleagues within the design of that meeting. And then if you are in the team builder, then you are trying one of the tools there. You can pick any of the tools that I've presented, team building kind of. And the one that people really are liking the most is around asset mapping. So it's interesting, right? Because teams, I've got some people in there, like it's a team of 2 or 3 people. And they're like, but I've been working with this small team and we don't really know each other's strengths. So how can we draw from each other's strengths if we've never had that conversation? And so they're doing the asset mapping protocol with their small team, and then they're putting on the Ready in the Huddle Up platform their reflections of it, like how it went, what the challenges were, what the outcomes were, all of that, and they're giving each other feedback on how they're using the tools. So yeah, that's sort of how it looks across the 3.
Feedback that's happening on Huddle Up, is that happening on Huddle Up, or is that feedback happening in person, or is it a mix? Kind of
Yeah.
give me a sense of how that's working.
So it will happen on Huddle Up, and we will be carving out time for that. I thought that was important that we carve out time for people to give effective feedback, and that we kind of go through like what is really feed forward and give them some examples and some support in how to do that. And remembering that feed forward can be hard to give and hard to receive. So again, we're building capacity in their leadership in giving feedback to people. So it's kind of like multi-pronged. And we're going to do that when I'm there in person. They're going to pull up their Huddle Up platform right there with me, and then have a chance to get in and look at somebody else's action plan, somebody else's, reflection tool, and give some feed forward there.
And will that be with like the use of a rubric, or is it,
Yeah,
qualitative feedback? Like what continue to paint this picture, because
sure.
I'm sure, like, I'm not being there at ACS, like the picture I'm getting now is even more vivid than what I had coming into this discussion. So like now I just want to learn more and more and more.
Good, great. Happy to share. So the other thing is, you'll hear me say a lot like the word intentional. So intentionally, we don't want it to be judgmental, evaluative. We want it to be supportive in every way. So what I'll be doing, what's already preloaded in the Huddle Up, in the Huddle section, is some sentence stems to frame how they're going to enter their feed forward, so that it starts them off. It gives them something to comment on, something to look for. But what essentially they're doing is they're looking for evidence of what they learned in the Readies, evident in the artifact that they've shared. And there's also space for people to say like, oh, here's a resource, here's an article, here's a podcast, here's something that goes along that might be helpful for you to go further with this. And also, like, I'll be on there. I'm sure Aaron and Bobby are going to want to be giving feedback too and looking in. So they'll get it from multiple people.
Awesome. Sounds great. And then will they be asked to update their artifact?
So I think that could be a potential. Like, we haven't talked yet about next steps, but I think that could be a potential kind of thing. Like, okay, now you've gone off and you've presented that action plan to your leadership team. And now what? How do you iterate even further? So I think we can talk about our next steps. That's something that we wanted to do, is like, how do we continue this learning? What did we learn? If it was a pilot, then like, what are we going to do next with this?
Right. No, I was talking with another guest, and they're having she called it an adult science fair. So they're going to put all of their artifacts on display at the end of the year, so that everybody can see what everybody else was working on. Because similar, they're using Huddle Up, and then the groups that they had set up, only those people could see what's happening in their groups, but not necessarily what's happening in the other groups. And so finding a chance to have, a live in-person gallery walk, essentially, so they can see what else is happening. So I don't know if that's something that you planned, or, or would like to maybe think about, but that was something that came from a previous guest. So maybe you want to run with that a little bit.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love it.
So it sounds like we're getting to the huddles now. And again, Kristine, you're going to have a chance to give more feedback. They're going to give feedback to each other. You said, you mentioned next steps and not really sure. What are some wishes, I guess, for next steps? Maybe we can brainstorm together out loud and see where you guys can go next. Aaron, do you want to jump in on that since you're boots on the ground?
Yeah, I know one of the things that Kristine, Bobby, and I have talked about is also using this time in May for the pilot group to give their feedback, because for sure we want to incorporate their learning from the process and how to essentially update or make the next iteration of this. And so I don't know if that is going to be more facilitated for qualitative data, or if we're going to give a survey to get some quantitative data in the mix as well. But we definitely have identified the need for participants to give their feedback. And so I think that's one of the for sure things we'll do next. And Bobby and I have talked about what does this look like next year, because we do see the importance of it, the value in it. And just from the feedback we've received from our teacher leaders and their appreciation of it, that we know this is something that we want to capitalize on and build upon. And I see a lot of time and conversations with Kristine when she's here on the ground to really think about what does this look like over the course of the next school year, and to the thought that you've already given us, Vic, just in terms of, does it have to all happen at the same time and be concurrent, or can somebody pick this up when they're ready during a portion of the year that makes sense for them? So we have this shared and collective experience, but maybe it's not happening all at the same time, but it's all to the same end of really thinking about who do I want to be as a leader.
Kristine?
Yeah, some of my hopes would be, even in those one-on-one conversations, we were getting into very specifics, like where someone would say, this is great, the team building, and I have this really unique dynamic on my team. And like we'd get into some problem solving together. So I'm imagining even taking some of that and working through a problem of practice type of protocol with particular groups, just to really extend their learning even more and help them to problem solve more. The other thing I was thinking is like, what if everybody were to go through each path, all three pathways at some point in their time at ACS, and then they come out with some sort of badge for having completed all three pathways. And then kind of the other thing I'm thinking of is some more on-demand content for people that regardless of which pathway you're in, if, okay, oh my gosh, all of a sudden there's been a conflict on my team. Like, let me look at this resource here. There's a whole module on conflict. And so it's on demand. It's like ready for me when I need it. And I know where to go for it. I think all of that could be really innovative as well, because it's ultimately, it's about supporting, ACS does a beautiful job of supporting not just their middle leaders, but like the way that they imagine professional learning. They're really smart about it. And so I think this is really forward thinking. They're not satisfied with like doing what every other school is doing. They're trying to look at what's innovative and designed to meet the needs of people. And I think it's really helping to, it's not just about becoming a change agent at ACS. It's like long after my time at ACS, these are skills that I'm going to use for life. And they're really fortunate that they're at a school that values that and is investing in them in that way.
Awesome. And if I can just ask, what has been the role that Huddle Up's played in making this a reality or a smoother reality, maybe?
Yeah. So I know for me, I've taught online courses. I'm an adjunct professor for a university, and I've taught online courses using things like Canvas. And so there's some similarities, right? Like I upload my video lessons and there are different modules that people can work through. What's different here? I also kind of really like the metaphor of like the ready, run, huddle. I think that makes a lot of sense. We're getting you ready, you're going to run with it, and then we're going to huddle back up. And I use that metaphor, I find really helpful, and we use it in that way. But I think what's different here is that collaboration. So you can, on a Canvas, you can create a discussion board, but this has more flexibility in terms of people being able to get in and see the artifacts that people are putting up and then be able to provide feedback right then and there. And there's other features that I don't even think we've explored on Huddle Up just yet, but this was sort of our first go with it, and it's been working really well for us.
Great. Aaron, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say, to echo off of what Kristine has shared, just the transparency piece that Huddle Up provides and the ease of which people can interact within the space. And so again, knowing some of these other platforms where you might be able to do, but it's not as seamless or instinctive as what we're finding the Huddle Up platform being. So it's very much in line with what we want that end user experience to be when we were thinking about how do we get them to connect and collaborate, but not having to be all physically in the same space at the same time.
Great. Awesome to hear. So one way I've ended all my podcasts is with giving the guest a chance to give a shout out to anybody they'd like to, whether it's this process or something you got going on otherwise. But if you'd like to take a second, think about a person or two or three, I basically hand the mic over completely to you to shout out whoever you want to shout out.
That is very cool. I feel like I'm accepting an award or something. I'm like, and I want to thank.
Kind of, yeah. We can look at it that way. You
I
have
do
amazing initiatives there.
I mean, I
And
think
not the track medals.
I think the obvious ones for me are my partners at ACS, but I don't want to forget how this all really started. Was I met Derek Luby at a conference, and I met him. He was in my session. I was doing a whole session on, it was a leadership conference, and I was doing a deep dive on super teams. And so like that idea of building your teams, and he was in there. And afterward, he came up and he was just sort of like, you know, what if we were to continue this learning outside of the deep dive? And I was like, tell me more. And so then that's really where the conversation started. So I think I have to shout Derek out because he's really made this all possible in more ways than one, but also really believing in me as well and staying in touch with me to see what we're able to do together.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Aaron?
Yeah, I'm gonna give shout out to Kristine and Bobby just for being visionaries around this and really thinking there are no limits. So what can we do and how can we re-envision this support and this learning for our teacher leaders? And I want to collectively shout out all of our teacher leaders, those that participated, those that didn't, but just for all of the work that they continue to do for teachers here at ACS and ultimately our students, but all of the learning and work that they've put into themselves this year.
Great. And while I don't know those teacher leaders that are in the program, I'm going to shout out them as well for being risk takers and taking the chance. And sounds like they're having a good experience. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully you get some more people on board next year. I hope it continues to grow because I know that it only benefits the entire community, not just those teacher leaders, but it upstream, downstream, the students, the parents, everybody benefits when we all level up. So with that, I'm going to bring this episode to a close. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing. We appreciate it. We definitely appreciate the innovative work you are doing. And hopefully, I would imagine you'll be a model to schools all over the world, especially after hearing about this. So you might be getting emails or phone calls really soon.
I hope so. Yeah, they can maybe we'll share how they can reach us in the notes.
Yes.
Absolutely, will do. So any last words before we part?
Oh, I want to just, thank you all for joining and listening in on the conversation. Hopefully there were pieces there that you're thinking, yeah, we're on the same kind of journey with our school. And I think a lot of schools are really thinking deeply about supporting middle leaders because we just know that they're in a tough spot. And we know that when we leverage that role, they are the change agents. They are the change artists.
Great. Thanks, Kristine. Aaron, anything? Last words?
Just for sure happy to share, but we also are learners. So we're happy to learn from other schools and the work that they're doing, supporting their teacher leaders. So looking forward to being in touch with anybody that's interested.
Great. Thanks for that. So good luck to you guys with the rest of the journey this school year.
Thank you.
Finishing
Thank
out
you.
the school year. Stay strong. And then we'll catch you on a follow-up in a later episode. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.